just help us here. Is there any opportunity for a compromise on this issue, given that it seems, at least over the past week, that Democrats don't even want to get in the room with the president?
Well, I actually don't think that's an appropriate characterization. I think the last meeting that took place, the president walked out on the two Democratic leaders. But let's not look back. Let's look forward. There are a group of senators. There are a group of senators from both parties who've said, "Hey, if the leaders can't come to a decision, let a group of bipartisan folks who can get to yes work together, but start with the premise that you go ahead and reopen the government for a couple of weeks, give us time to see if we can come up with something that might meet both needs, that would have increased border security, but it starts with an reopening of the government." We've got Republican senators who will at least privately acknowledge the last thing you want to do is reward the president's behavior of holding all these folks hostage, because if this tactic at all proves to be successful, you'll see it again on debt ceiling, you'll see it again on the end of the year spending bills, and this is not the way we ought to be running the largest enterprise in the world, the federal government, where I can tell you, maybe it's not in New York yet, but in D.C., Maryland, Virginia, the amount of economic hurt that's taking place at the family level and on the general economy level, meaning it will take us months
Senator,
to recover.
I'm not going to quarrel with the idea that everybody wants the government to be reopened and is opened as soon as possible. The question, of course, is both sides are using this as leverage. And the question I'm asking right now is there any opportunity for compromise, and compromise being anything beyond Democrats saying you got to open the government, and if you don't open the government, we can't really have a conversation even about the border, and on the other side, on the Republican side, saying if you don't have a conversation about the border, we're not even going to talk about reopening the government?
I think you're going to see hope, and I know there's been an effort the last 24 hours, a number of us, hopefully a little more reasonable-minded in both parties, saying give us a bit of a cooling off period. This happens in other negotiations. Give us a cooling off period. Let's not hold people hostage. Let them get their paycheck. Let them go back to work. I tell you, if I'm flying, I want to make sure the air traffic controller's thinking about the safety of the air, not trying to figure out whether he can pay his kids tuition. And let another group try for a couple weeks to get to yes. I'm all for additional smart border security. I mean, this is not a question about more border security. There is going to be a debate about how what that border security ought to look like. And frankly, there's even been some who've suggested, this would take longer, but if there was an effort to say, let's agree on a number and turn it over to some panel of experts, so you take the politics out. I mean, there are reasonable ways to get to yes, but it doesn't. But the notion that we're going to keep this closed.
Could any version of yes include any form of a border wall, even in a short-term way? Say, you know what, we'll put, Democrats will put $1 billion down, $1.5 billion down, $2 billion down on some form of border security, and then we'll open up the government and keep moving it.
Well, yeah, some form of border security. I mean, as I think people have talked about, there's already fencing, I think around 700 miles, but that was decided by border security experts who said where are the biggest population areas, and a lot of that was built back before I got here in 2006. But as we all both know, technology has changed dramatically since 2006. I want to spend the money the smartest, the best way possible. And I don't think it's a question of increasing border security. I'm all for it.
Senator, there's no shortage of 2020 challenges, but you haven't said anything. But like a lot of people they just bring you up all the time. You're a businessman. It reminds me of that Reagan comment. I don't think that your age is a problem. Your relative inexperience. You're so youthful because you are. But
hey, I work in the only place in America where at 64 I'm one of the young guys.
No, maybe TV too. But seriously, is there any part of you that's even considering that? I mean, to be honest with you, some of the people that are announcing, it's like, I guess Trump was hard to imagine too, but they don't have a shot in hell, Senator. Some of them, and I figure you really would be a viable candidate.
Well, you're kind of saying, I think there's got to be some folks trying to work here in the Senate to get to yes.
You're not going to do it no matter what?
Now, listen, I got some ideas that I want to make sure are part of the debate. We've talked on this show before about I fear that if we got to find a way to make capitalism work for more people again in America. I think that's one of the biggest problems we've got. I've got some ideas about that because I do fear the far left and the far right are driving us off the cliff. But I think I can be part of the debate.
Senator, on that very issue of capitalism and the debate that this country seems to be having, I want to show our viewers a poll. I'll read it to you so you can see it. This is a new poll out. I believe The Hill did it. A majority of registered voters, 59%, said they would support a proposal made by, yes, we call her AOC these days, to increase the top marginal tax rate to 70%. This is according to this survey conducted by The Hill and Harris X just yesterday, and goes to this very issue of what's going on in our economy and capitalism, and also what's going on in the Democratic Party in terms of how left it may or may not have veered.
Listen, are there ways to make our tax code fair? Absolutely. Let me give you, I know we're short on time, but let me give you 3 quick ideas that I think would be as important, if not more important. Nobody's going to work for the same job for 30 years going forward. We ought to have a portable benefit system so that you can take your benefits from one job to another. We ought to recognize that we ought to treat investment in human capital the same way we treat investment in tangible assets. Why do you invest in a computer? You get an R&D tax credit. You invest in a human being, you don't. And I think we ought to have a debate, and frankly, this is something you guys talk about a lot, about the notion of long-termism versus short-termism in the capital markets. I would argue that many of the great American companies created post-World War II couldn't be created today because of the enormous pressure on short-term.
Would you support a 70% marginal tax rate?
Listen, I would support a fairer tax return, and I would support a tax. Frankly, I think the tax cut that was done in the past, we could have made America competitive without 21% rates, and it could have been paid for. But I think the way to actually move the incentives is to, frankly, get business reinvesting in human capital.